PlayStation VR2 is an almost generational leap for the VR industry. Not just a good headset to buy if you already have a PlayStation 5. It pushes the boundaries of immersion and display technology and comfort. And it has me excited again for VR the way I haven't been since the first time I entered the Tuscany Villa on the Oculus Development Kit 1. First off, who am I and why should you trust me? I've been using VR since the earliest days of the original dev kit a decade ago from a MTBS 3D forum goer by the name of Palmer Luckey, who you probably know later formed Oculus and arguably kickstarted the entire consumer VR industry. I've owned and tried more headsets than I can count on my hands, and until now I've settled on the Oculus Quest 2 for ease of accessibility, pick up and play, etc., as well as the Valve Index for tethered, high-quality PC VR gaming. Now, I picked up the PSVR 2 for both exclusive games and to see how the hardware has improved over the current offerings. I did briefly try the original PSVR for our review years ago, but back then it wasn't something I actually wanted to keep hold of. So I'm not going to talk too much about games in this review, particularly those that are already available on other platforms. I don't care about those because chances are I already have them elsewhere, and so most of my testing focused around Horizon Call of the Mountain.
Can you stop driving so close to their feet?
My review will therefore address the PSVR 2 from the perspective of someone similar to me, someone who has already dabbled with VR in various forms, rather than someone completely new to the whole VR thing. So let's talk about the hardware. In terms of connection and setup, it's a really simple package. Gone are the multiple cables, external boxes and adapters, and horrendous iToy tracking camera of the original PSVR. Instead, the PSVR 2 features inside-out tracking via 4 cameras on the headset itself. This is very similar to the way the Quest 2 does it, and the wired connection to your PS5 is with a single USB-C cable. That's it. There's not even an external power brick. The controllers are now actual VR controllers and not repurposed motion toys, and this time they again resemble something like the Oculus Quest 2, and no, I won't call it the Meta Quest 2, and you can't make me. They feature a pronounced ring that encloses your knuckles, and this is where the infrared tracking LEDs are located, which the headset can see. So onto some technical specs. The headset features a 2000 by 2040 pixel OLED panel per eye, capable of running at up to 120 Hz, though games usually manage 60 to 90 Hz, which is then reprojected to 120. The OLED panels result in incredibly deep black levels compared to the usual grey you can find on other headsets, and they're also HDR capable. In addition, the lenses feature eye or gaze tracking, which is incredible for 2 reasons. Firstly, it enables foveated rendering, which means only the bit you're actually looking at needs to be rendered in a higher resolution. The rest of the display around the edges can be a bit blurrier, and that leads to improved performance. The second thing gaze tracking enables is quicker UI interactions. Normally you'd have a fixed pointer sort of emitted from your headset direction, or you would have to use your controller to point at the menu options. With gaze tracking, you can literally just look at the menu items to select them. It's pretty cool. As for design and comfort, it's that same basic Halo headband concept as the PSVR original was, but with some upgrades. So the screen part can be moved forwards and backwards. And while normally if you did this on another headset there would be masses of light leak around the front, the PSVR 2 has a deep flexible silicon facial interface, which works really well for me anyway to cut out the light. You just stretch the headband out easily to fit it on your head, and then you turn the button to tighten it once positioned correctly. At only 560 grams, it's significantly lighter than the Valve Index and only slightly heavier than the Quest 2. One major departure from the original PSVR is that the screen no longer flips up. On the other hand, it doesn't need to, because it has a great pass-through mode that enables you to easily see the outside world while still wearing it. Just press the button underneath the headset, and that's all thanks to the built-in camera-based tracking system. Setup is really simple if you're familiar with the concept of drawing a room-scale boundary. But I feel like they missed a step when it came to onboarding, in that there isn't any at all. You're basically plonked back into the system and told to go download some games. This was a little bit disappointing because it's a real opportunity to show off all the amazing capabilities and really blow your mind, especially for someone newer to VR. Something as simple as Astro Playroom in VR would have been great, demoing the immersive features and the new haptics. It's a lost opportunity, but anyhow. Let's talk quickly about comfort. The rigid headband style is so much more comfortable than other headsets I've tried. It can feel a little bit unsteady as it sort of sits on your head like a crown, but when you tighten it, it's fine. That said, I don't think there's a correct way to wear it. If it works for you, if you've found your sweet spot and it's comfortable, then don't worry about if it's right or not, it is. The fact that you can move the display forward or backwards is great for comfort when wearing glasses. Often you'll find headsets, the lenses can push your own lenses in, or you have to worry about scratching the lenses. And that's not the case here. You can easily accommodate glasses. In terms of finding a sweet spot, I haven't really had an issue, but many people are saying it's a very small sweet spot. Though again, this could just be because of their experience level. The headset actually also includes some small haptics, but so far I haven't really noticed it being used outside of the initial scene in Call of the Mountain where a big machine gets close and you feel a sort of rumble on your head. It's a bit weird, but I haven't noticed it outside of that. Also on the subject of comfort is the audio solution offered here. In the box is a pair of earbuds that just clips into the back of the Halo band and then into the 3.5mm stereo jack. They're decent enough, but I have a truly irrational hatred of all earbuds, so the lack of a built-in sort of off-ear headphones like the Valve Index has is less ideal for me. You can, of course, plug in your own earbuds or headphones, but for headphones anyway, finding something that will suit the large headband style without hitting into it is a bit more difficult, and it's a little more faff before you can enjoy VR. Something which otherwise the PSVR 2 excels at, getting you into the action quickly. The controllers are obviously an immense step up from the abomination of PS Move wands that the original PSVR utilised, no doubt. The real question is, are they better than the Quest 2 or the Valve Index controllers? And yes, they actually feel like the best of both worlds. In terms of aesthetics, they're most similar to the Quest 2, but if the tracking rings were set further back. The feature set, however, is more akin to the Index controllers, though not quite as granular when it comes to capacitive touch. As someone who really doesn't like the thin, stick-like shape of the Index controllers and their realistic grip mechanism, the presence of actual grip buttons on the PSVR 2 controllers is much appreciated. In short, it feels perfectly balanced, both in terms of weight distribution and, for me, sizing. Unlike most people, I really liked the old-style Vive wands because they were so chunky. It felt like you were holding a sword or a gun. The Index controllers are positively tiny and stick-like. The PSVR 2 controllers aren't too small and they aren't too big. That said, some people with really big hands have found themselves not being able to grip properly because of the close tracking rings, with their knuckles sometimes hitting up against it. So if you think that might apply to you, it's probably worth demoing the headset somewhere first. The haptics inside the controller are nothing remarkable, at least if they are, it's nothing we haven't already seen in the PlayStation Sense controller, so I might just be acclimatized to those force triggers and such by now. They're great, don't get me wrong, but since you're unlikely to be buying just straight up the PS5 and PSVR 2, you've probably got used to the tech inside the triggers. As for that inside-out tracking, it's very similar to the Quest 2, and it suffers from the same issues. Any really bright sunlight will cause glitches, though you do need some level of light for the optical tracking camera to work. If you turn off all the lights, it won't work. You can't use it outside because the infrared from the sun is too strong for the tracking, though obviously as a cabled headset, that's not really a consideration. And because it's an optical system with forward-facing cameras, if you move the controllers behind you or out of sight of the cameras, they will stop tracking and they'll glitch. If you've used a Quest 2, you'll be familiar with the drawbacks, and it is what it is. I don't think the PSVR 2 improves upon the tried and tested inside-out optical tracking, but it's still good. So you can create either a very restrictive seated boundary that I found was impossible to use because it was just too small, and any attempt to fire a bow just hit up against the boundary really breaks the immersion. Or you can create a full room scale boundary for actually being able to move around. Regardless of whether you intend to play seated or standing and actually moving, I would suggest doing the room scale boundary anyway. For testing, I jumped straight into Horizon Call of the Mountain, and while this is a PSVR 2 hardware review, not a Call of the Mountain game review, the criticism of it being a sort of 70% climbing game is very much fair, and at times the climbing aspect does feel like it's being overused to pad out the other content. Still, it is a visual feast in every way, and the combat, which sees you strafing around targets and firing your bow, is superb. Bow firing in VR are nearly always a winning combo anyway. It's not an open world game, and it can be quite restrictive when it comes to actually navigating the world. I found myself constantly getting stuck, even though the object I was attempting to step on top of or move through was, a 1 centimetre high step or just a tiny little bush plant. Nope, that's a no-go area. But looking out upon those mountain views is just magical, and it's here where we can really see the breathtaking quality of those OLED screens. So in terms of visual quality, the use of OLED screens and the fact that they're HDR capable means that you have incredible contrast levels. Blacks are truly black, not a murky mid-grey, and the bright scenes can be almost blinding, with a full gamut of vibrant HDR colours in between. I've read a lot of first-time users complaining of a sort of blur across everything, and it's possible what they're referring to is what's commonly known as Mura. A visual artifact that most headsets have. It sort of manifests itself as a very faint pixel noise that's very close to your eyes. Now, if you specifically go looking for it, I think you are going to notice it, especially in dark loading screens or menus. But if you're coming from another headset as I am and you know what to expect, I don't think you're going to care. It's certainly no more pronounced here than on any other headset I've tried, though it's also possible I just got lucky with the OLED panels in mind. There may be some variability in manufacturing, which I wouldn't know unless I got multiple headsets. For me, though, it's easily ignored once an actual scene loads in and the truly stunning visuals take over. It might be worse in very dark scenes, but I don't tend to play horror games, so it's not going to be an issue for me. I also tried out GT7, and apart from having to sit through that entire intro video, I mean, oh, wow, what an experience. Especially paired with the racing wheel and Your VR2 motion sim. If you're wondering why I haven't reviewed the Your VR2 yet, it's because although it is incredible, it was a Kickstarter that I got in on really early, and I was lucky enough to have it delivered, but they've since basically run out of money due to rising costs. They've only been able to ship a few devices each month. They've had to resort to outsourcing production, and they're using new retail sales to fund the rest of the Kickstarter deliveries that haven't happened yet, on top of making a number of design changes in the meantime. So it's difficult to recommend it at the moment, but I promise I will get around to reviewing it properly at some point. Anyway, that's linked up to Sim Racing Studio on a PC, which reads the telemetry data over the network and then sends it back to the motion device for the relevant actions. Very cool. I have tried it with PC gaming racing games before and never really enjoyed the experience that much. Outside of Dirt Rally, anyway.
Yes! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Not cool, dude!
GT7, however, feels very much more arcadey and definitely made me a believer. Fantastic fun. At the very least, you should have a racing wheel for this. But there is just no comparison between flat screen gaming and VR. The field of view is around 110 degrees, depending on how close you're able to bring the lenses to your eyes. And it's good enough. It's better than the Quest 2's around 90-degree field of view, but slightly less than the Valve Index. But field of view is not an exact science, and if you're going to move the screen away because you wear glasses, you'll restrict the field of view anyway. Certainly, we're still not at or near the level of full 180-degree complete realistic immersion. It does still feel like you're somewhat wearing a mask. So overall, the PSVR 2 as a whole package, I think, is a generational shift for VR headsets, and it sets an incredibly high bar at a great price point. If you only have $1,000 and want the latest in VR tech, the PS5 and the PSVR2 combo simply cannot be beaten on value. The Valve Index alone is upwards of $1,000 and still needs a powerful PC just to make use of it. While there are always going to be improvements that could be made at this point in the development of VR headsets, the PSVR2 is beyond doubt, to this VR enthusiast, an incredibly good device. It's comfortable, it's full of advanced tech with haptics and gaze tracking, and the fact it all works over a single USB-C cable with onboard tracking for sheer ease of setup is incredible. We have come such a long way since the days of needing to plug in 4 or 5 USB cables to USB 3 ports for external tracking cameras, and oh no, that port won't work, try it in a USB 2 port instead. The console ethos of it just works is incredibly compelling. I can't tell you how many hours I've wasted with frustrating Steam VR issues. So yes, from a hardware perspective, I highly recommend the PSVR 2. The only concern for me is whether Sony is going to support it as fully as I would like them to. Steam VR and Quest 2 ports are good to fill out the library of games, but it's ultimately the exclusives that will grab market share and pull in more enthusiasts like myself. On top of that, the PSVR 2 hardware is pretty locked down right now. Even if physically possible, it's unlikely this will ever get full PC connectivity support. If we did, honestly, I would sell my Valve Index in a heartbeat. But right now, you can't even get a web browser or a VR video player for the PS5 at the moment, which means no VR movies of any kind. So, early days, promising hardware, but a bit of a shaky start when it comes to software. I'm James Bruce, you've been watching MakeUseOf.com reviews. Please hit like if this review helped you. And do consider subscribing for more gadget reviews, giveaways, and more. I'll see you in the next one.